Today I'm going to be talking about the empire of Alexander the Great, as well as his conquests. Here I have with me a map of roughly the territory that he controlled throughout his reign. This includes Greece, Anatolia, the Levant, Northern Africa, Persia, as well as parts of Central and Southern Asia. Today what I might be doing is tracing the path that he and his companions took on his conquest, as well as labeling the important locations, cities, and geographical features that played a major role in his consolidation of the known world. It is also important to mention that in pink dotted line I have drawn today's modern borders. Now, I have done this to provide a better understanding of where exactly these important events and battles and whatnot are taking place in reference to today's locations. Now, in accordance with today's video topic, I will be chewing some mastic gum called the Tears of Chios, or rather the Tears of Chios. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, but the Tears of Chios is a mastic gum that is derived from the tree sap of a special tree grown primarily on the Greek island of Chios, that is in the Aegean Sea. So, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to label the rivers and bodies of water, starting with the Nile and the Siwa Oasis, which is quite important to Alexander's mission or other conquest, but I'll get to that later. And reminds me, I forgot this one over here. It's quite important. It's small but quite important. It is called the Granicus. It's called the Granicus River. It was where Alexander fought one of his first major battles. Of course, can't forget the Dead Sea, the Tigris River, and the Euphrates River. Now, here we have what is today called the Aras River. Not sure if it was called that back then. There is a river here, and I did lots of research on what it is called. And all I could find is that today it is called the Kabul River. Over here, I'm not sure if the camera can see it, but to the right is the Indus River. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll get to that later. Here's the Aral Sea, the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Aegean Sea. I think I might have spelled that wrong. Yeah, sorry. There's a E there as well. Okay. Now that I have labeled all the important bodies of water, I'm going to move on to label the mountain ranges and highlands, starting with the Carpathian Mountains, the Dinaric Mountains, we have the Taurus Mountains in Anatolia, the Caucasus Mountains, the Zagros Mountains, and the Hindu Kush. Okay, here's the Indus River that the camera can get. And here are the Himalaya Mountains. Well, they might be a little bit more to the east, but it's a general idea. Now that we have the geographical landmarks, or rather, geographical features, let's get into some facts, quick facts. Background of Alexander the Great. So I'm not sure if can't. Okay, sorry about that. His real name was Alexander of Macedon, and his father, Philip II of Macedon, was actually the one who consolidated most of Greece and Greek locations of course, Macedonia, most of the Peloponnese, and Epirus. And he married a Epitorian, I believe. Not quite sure. He married an Epitorian woman, I think. A woman from Epirus. A princess. So, here we have the city of Pelas, which was the original Pella, not Pelas, my bad. Pella, the original capital of Macedonia. And we have Athens, a very important city. We have Corinth, and Sparta, which actually most claim and most likely was never actually incorporated into Alexander's empire, as they had a peace treaty with, it was made by Alexander's father, or maybe not even a peace treaty, rather more of an alliance. So they promised never to conquer Sparta, also because the Spartan army was possibly even better than the Macedonian army, and they did not want to mess with them. So Sparta maintained its independence, but the rest of the Peloponnese were subjugated, and I believe that's where most of the revolts happened. And I believe Alexander's first military campaign was actually putting down a revolt in one of these Greek city-states. No. I'm going to point out the two Greek islands of Crete and Cyprus. The Greek pronunciation, I believe, is Kypros, or Kypru. Right here is, well, I'm just gonna mark that as an X because I believe it is where the city of Troy used to be, but since it was destroyed, I believe. Here is the city of Sardis, and by the way, most of these cities are going to be vital later on in explaining Alexander's conquests. Like right, okay. I'm just gonna mark that off as we'll get to that city later, but it's also important. Here in the region of Phoenicia was the city of Tyre, or yeah, I believe it's pronounced Tyre. And here is the still remaining city today, hasn't changed its name or anything, of Gaza. And of course here we have Alexandria, which at the time it was not called Alexandria. Now, before Alexander's conquests, the city of Alexandria in Egypt was actually called Rakedet in Egyptian, I believe. Then they renamed it to Alexandria. Here we have the city of Memphis, not Tennessee. And here is Thebes. And I believe both of these cities, Memphis and Thebes, were once Egyptian capitals of the Old Kingdom, or Middle Kingdom, forgot. Here we have the city of Arbela, and of course the city of Babylon. And over here, the city of Susa, Shusha, or Persian translation, or Persian pronunciations always here we have Persepolis, which sounds like a Greek name. I believe it was probably called something else before Alexander came, but on the map it's called Persepolis. Now, most of these names have changed since then, but this is at the time of, I believe, Alexander's death, but we haven't gotten there yet. Here, I'm going to name some regions. Here is the region of Cyrenaica, and the city of Cyrene, or maybe Kyrene, I don't know. I'll just use the English translation at this point. Here we have Phoenicia, the land of the Phoenicians, ancient civilization. It's known for seafaring. Here's the region of Anatolia, which was mostly, well, was partially inhabited by Greeks and Persians and perhaps native Anatolians. I believe here's Egypt, Persia, Bactria, and the region of India, which the Greeks believed was the easternmost region of the world. Now, I'm going to point out some of the semi-nomadic or more tribal people groups. The Scythians, which are actually closely related to the Persians. The Illyrians, which weren't really tribal or nomadic, but they had conflicts with the Greeks many times. The Arabs, which inhabited the Arabian Peninsula and still do. And over here, it's probably not on the map, but to the east were the Tocharians, which were also another Iranic group. They might have actually, their civilization may have been destroyed by now, but I believe they inhabited the Hindu. No, they didn't inhabit the Hindu Kush, but they were closely related to the Bactrians. That's what I remember. Let's draw a quick compass rose. Probably should have done that before. No. Let me point out. Alright, let's start on Alexander's campaign. Now, his campaign started soon after his father, Philip, was assassinated in Pella, I believe, which was the capital at the time. May have been another city, but he started by putting down revolts because at first people didn't really want him as a king because he was the son of an Epitorian princess, and they weren't considered very Greek by the other Greeks. But he quite easily put down the revolts, and he also had a very, quite possibly the most Greek education you can have, because he was in fact tutored by Aristotle himself. So, he went down here to fight the Persians, who at the time controlled Anatolia. His first major battle was the Battle of Granicus, here at the Granicus River. He fought the Battle of Granicus, 333 BC, and the Battle of I believe they were both fought in 333 BC. Possibly. Lots of the timeline is, especially once it gets to the Far East, the records get a little fuzzy, but nevertheless, he swiftly took the important cities of Tyre and Gaza from the Persians. Egypt actually named Alexander their pharaoh once he came in, and then he founded the city of Alexandria. He went to Siwa, and an oracle told him a lot of things, but the oracle told him that he would go on to conquer a lot of the known world at the time, basically. I guess that gave him a confidence boost. Nevertheless, the major battle of Arbela was fought here, and that's where the tides turned, and it was clear from then on that Alexander would go on to subjugate possibly the entirety of Persia. He came down and was greeted at Babylon, and he loved Babylon so much that he actually named it his capital of his new empire. And he even adopted King Darius of Persia's family into his home, and let lots of the Persian nobility rule over their own territory, which is why he was beloved so much, because he gave lots of people their autonomy. So, he fought the Battle of Susa. He went on to pursue King Darius, who had fled to Susa. He subjugated Persepolis and rode through Persia, and eventually King Darius was actually killed by one of his commanders, and after that he actually chased them down and killed them, and by this time he had conquered all of Persia. So he continued his journey to Bactria, and this is where he married his first wife, Rakshana. That's how it was pronounced, I believe. It was a Bactrian princess. So he tried to cross the Hindu Kush. He was trying to make it into the inner sea, which, we'll get to that later. But he crossed the Indus River into India and subjugated part of India. But his men were tired of fighting, so I made him go down the Indus and go back home. And he had a general, I believe, called Nearchus, sail down through the Persian Gulf in order to explore. He wanted to see. They were trying to find the inner sea, but which is what the Greeks believed was the end of the world, but they couldn't find it. But so Alexander went back home to Babylon, which he now considered his home. But after returning to Babylon in 323 BC, completely heartbroken over the death of his greatest companion, Hephaestion, as well as being sick from, some say it was malaria, others say it was some other disease, some even say he was actually poisoned, but I'm going to outline the borders of the greatest extent of Alexander's empire. It starts at the Danube River, as most believe, most likely. His empire did not include Sparta, and so they maintained their independence in an alliance. It encompassed most of Anatolia and the Caucasus regions. It encompassed part of northern Africa, Egypt, of course, Cyrenaica, and most of the Levant, and Mesopotamia. And to the east, he conquered all of Persia, parts of western India, and parts of what today we consider Central Asia. And this is the greatest extent of his empire. There's several maps. Lots of historians claimed it was different. Some claim he conquered more actually. Others claim less, but we'll never come to a consensus really, so. Anyway, once he died, parts of the Indo-Greek kingdom, lots of them claimed independence or were absorbed by the Indian Mauryan Empire. We have a split here. This empire was actually divided by his generals. Egypt, and then I have another divide here at Thrace. Now, the general Cassander acted as a regent for Alexander's posthumous son, who was also called Alexander, and was the son of the Bactrian princess Roxana. But they were both assassinated, I believe. Here in Egypt, Egypt went to Ptolemy, and here in Thrace was given to, or is now named Lysimachia, I believe, was declared independent, parts of the empire. Here in Sinai was taken by a Arab tribe, I believe it was an Arab tribe called the Nabateans. Anatolia and the Levant was absorbed into the Antigonid Empire, controlled by Antigonian, or Antigonius, I believe. He's also one of major generals. The most popular of these post-Alexandrian kingdoms or empires is the Seleucid Empire, who ruled by Seleucus, which is also another general, and went on to become the most powerful of all of them, and even conquered as far as Thrace, I believe, and even most of Greece, I think. After Alexander died, he was eventually buried in Alexandria. His tomb was, for a long time, his tomb was a place of pilgrimage for those who wished to be as successful as he was, such as people like Julius Caesar visited his grave and became a very historical site. I believe it's lost now, but at the time it was very important site. Now, I will be showing a quick sketch of what the Greeks thought the world looked like. Now, I believe, well, some sources say that they believe the world was a globe. Others say they thought it was flat, but I'm not quite sure. I believe there were varying opinions on that. Mediterranean regions they mostly got right. Although, it's quite easy to see that it's quite distorted. Yeah. But they believe that the Atlantic Ocean, when they were unaware of the existence of Africa beyond the Sahara, they just believed that kind of empty. And Actually, interestingly, lots of them were also aware of the island of, they called Britannia, Britain of course, and even Ireland, but it was more, they believed it to be more mythological than, well, lots of people today even believe in its existence, but I also believed the Caspian Sea was actually connected to the ocean, to the Northern Ocean. They didn't really believe it was a sea at all. They believed it was more of a, well, I guess that could count as a sea, but anyway. They believed Africa ended here, and they also believed that the Nile actually emptied out. I'll get to that later, but so they thought the Persian Gulf looked like. And of course, I believe this is a map of before Alexander's conquest. I may be wrong, but because I'm sure after Alexander got back home here, lots of geographical conceptions changed, like they're aware of the entire Indian subcontinent rather than it just ending at the Indus or the Kush or wherever. They believed in this sea called the Inner Sea, which surrounded the world, and it could be used to navigate practically anywhere. Well, not anywhere, but it could be circumnavigated, they believed. I believe the Atlantic Ocean stretched to, well, they believe they didn't know about the existence of sub-Saharan Africa, so they believed all that was just the Atlantic Ocean. So we're aware of many of the rivers. As there were lots of Greek colonies and Phoenician colonies as far as even Spain. And they believed that this location in western Spain was more of a mythological thing, but they believed in the Pillars of Hercules in western Spain that kind of marked the westmost landmass in the world. Maybe not westmost, but of course they know about the Tigris and the Euphrates River. Here they believe the Nile actually, well, some of them, but lots believe the Nile emptied out into both oceans, but yeah, the Northern Ocean. They also believed in these mythological people who lived in the north, may have been a northern continent, but basically beyond the Scythians, called Hyperborea, or they're called Hyperboreans. Most likely influenced by contact with northern tribes, northern Germanic tribes possibly, maybe even Slavic, but most likely northern Germanic tribes. And here they have their depiction of the mountains across Persia, Bactria, and on the map I saw there was no depiction of where Atlantis used to be, so it may have been that most of them didn't actually believe in Atlantis, or they thought it was just mythology, but this place, part of Persia they called Ariana. And of course together you get the Indo-Aryans, which inhabited most of those mountainous locations. You have Bactria, Libya, of course, I forgot to mention Europa, which is what they call Europe, but yeah, this is what the Greeks thought the world looked like before Alexander's conquests. And his plan was originally to travel across the Indo-Greek mountain range and into the other side of the inner sea and sail all the way back right there to Babylon, through the Persian Gulf, and to even subjugate the Romans eventually. The Romans were still just a small tribe, but they're still quite infamous for their military tactics. Yeah, that is the Empire of Alexander the Great. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, and have a good day.